Have you ever noticed that if you give two people the exact same salary, one of them somehow ends up rich, and the other one stays exactly where they started? Same job, same paycheck, same bills to pay, and yet 10 years later, one of them owns property, has investments, maybe doesn't even need to work anymore, while the other one is still living paycheck to paycheck, wondering what happened. You'd think it comes down to who worked harder, or who was smarter with money, or who got lucky. But here's the strange part. Even when researchers study this, even when they control for education, for intelligence, for work ethic, the pattern doesn't go away. Money still tends to flow toward money, almost like wealth has its own gravity. So what is actually going on here? In this video, we're going to follow one man over 20 years of his life as he slowly figures this out, mostly by watching it happen to someone else and wondering why it never seems to happen to him. And by the end, you're going to understand something about money that most people go their entire lives without noticing, something that has nothing to do with intelligence and almost everything to do with a mechanism hiding in plain sight. Let's meet him. His name is Daniel, 26 years old, just started a solid job at a logistics company. Good salary for his age, disciplined, the kind of guy who actually reads his bank statements. There's a man at his office named Robert, older, mid-50s, runs one of the departments. Not flashy, doesn't act rich, drives an unremarkable car, wears the same 3 shirts on rotation. If you met him at a party, you'd never guess. But every so often, small things slip out. Robert mentions he's not worried about retirement. Robert casually says he picked up a rental property a while back, the way someone else might mention buying a used couch. Robert once says, half joking, that money gets boring once you have enough of it. Daniel doesn't think much of it at first. Older guy, been working longer, makes sense he's further along. Nothing mysterious there. But then something changes. Daniel starts paying closer attention, and the numbers don't add up the way he expects them to. Here's where it gets interesting, because this is the part almost nobody thinks about correctly. Daniel does some quiet math. Robert's salary, even after almost 30 years at the company, isn't actually that much higher than his own. Maybe 20% more, not nothing, but nowhere near enough to explain the gap Daniel is starting to sense between them. So Daniel does what most people never bother to do. He asks Robert directly, over coffee, how he got there. Robert laughs and says something Daniel doesn't understand at the time. He says he didn't get rich from his paycheck. His paycheck just gave the other thing time to work. Daniel nods like it makes sense. It doesn't. Not yet. Robert explains it slowly, and Daniel starts to realize this isn't really a story about income at all. Back when Robert was around Daniel's age, he put a small amount of money, not much, barely noticeable at the time, into an investment account and mostly forgot about it. For years, it did almost nothing. Robert says he used to check it and feel a little embarrassed by how small the number was. But money that's invested doesn't just grow in a straight line. It grows on top of what it already grew. The gains from one year start earning their own gains the next year, and the year after that, quietly, in the background, without Robert doing anything at all. For a long time, this is invisible, and that's exactly why Robert almost stopped bothering with it. It looked irrelevant, but 30 years is a long time for something to quietly stack on top of itself. Now here's the twist Daniel didn't expect. Robert tells him the amount he originally put in barely mattered. What mattered was that he started 3 decades ago and never touched it. Research on this backs him up. The size of the starting amount tends to matter far less than the number of years it's left alone to compound. A modest amount left for 30 years can end up outgrowing a much larger amount left for only 10. Which means the real head start wasn't money, it was time. Robert simply started the clock earlier than almost everyone he worked with. This is one of the more debated points in economics. How much of the wealth gap comes down to this timing effect versus other things, and experts don't fully agree on the exact proportion. But almost all of them agree the effect is real. Still, Daniel senses there's more to it, because compounding alone doesn't explain everything Robert has described. There's a second piece, and Robert brings it up almost as an afterthought. Daniel asks Robert if he ever worried about losing the money, and Robert says something that sticks with him. A few times over the years, opportunities came up, a chance to invest in a friend's small business, a chance to buy property when prices had dropped. Each time, Robert could afford to say yes, because if it went badly, his life wouldn't fall apart. He had enough of a cushion to survive being wrong. Daniel realizes he's had similar opportunities. He turned every one of them down, not because he didn't believe in them, but because he genuinely couldn't afford for any of them to go wrong. One bad month could mean missing rent. That's the part nobody says out loud. Having money doesn't just let you make more money. It lets you survive being wrong while you try. And the more times you're allowed to be wrong, the more chances you eventually get to be right. Robert got several of those chances across 30 years. Daniel, so far, has gotten 0. There's a third thing, and Robert only mentions it because Daniel keeps asking questions. The tax system, in most countries, treats income from a job differently than money earned from investments, since investment gains are often taxed at a lower rate than salary. This is genuinely debated. People disagree on whether it's fair or whether it exists to encourage investment in the first place. And Robert isn't making a political point about it. He's just describing what happened to his own numbers over time. Daniel's income is almost entirely from his paycheck. Robert's, these days, is increasingly from money that's simply working on its own. Even if their total incomes were identical on paper, they wouldn't end up keeping the same amount. By the time Daniel finishes his coffee, something has shifted for him. Not his salary, not his job, his understanding. Robert didn't get here through some secret or some scheme or by being smarter than everyone else in the building. He got here through 3 quiet things stacking on top of each other for 30 years. He started earlier. He could afford to take chances Daniel couldn't, and he kept more of what his money earned once it started earning on its own. None of it happened in one dramatic moment, and that's exactly why nobody around Robert ever noticed it happening. It wasn't a decision. It was 30 years of a small gap, quietly widening, one invisible year at a time. And that's really the answer to the question we started with. The rich don't necessarily keep getting richer because they're smarter, or because they work harder, or because of some conspiracy. A lot of it comes down to something almost boring. Money, once it exists, gets more time to grow, more room to take risks, and more favorable treatment when it does. And all 3 of those things reinforce each other, quietly, for years, until the gap looks enormous, even though no single moment ever felt unfair. Daniel walks away from that conversation with something Robert never actually handed him directly. Not advice, just a strange, uncomfortable thought. The biggest advantage in Robert's whole story wasn't intelligence, or effort, or even luck in the way people usually mean it. It was time, and nobody ever tells you the clock started before you even realized you were in the race.